Welcome to the Creation Innovation Podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth King. Together, we'll have conversations with incredible human beings who have taken their creative outlet and turned it into something innovative. From people leaving the corporate world to be 8-figure entrepreneurs to people who have created books, created a family, or just creating to have fun in the world. We are all in a journey to create something amazing in our lives, and I hope that you find some inspiration of your own here. This is the Creation Innovation Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back. I am so thrilled today to speak to Todd Sylvester. I was honored to be on his podcast recently, and just such a beautiful person inside and out.
Thank you.
Now happy to have him here to tell his story. And it is such a I only know surface level, so I'm looking forward to chatting with you today, Todd, to hear more about it. But I know that you're such a big inspiration and have such a big impact on everyone that you touched, not only through your private work, but also through your podcast. So welcome.
Well, thanks for having me, Elizabeth. Again, honored to be on your show now and grateful to know people like you who were like-minded people trying to make a difference in the world. And it's just great to rub shoulders with you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So tell us first of all, take us back to where you started on your path of where you're at now. We all have a story as to why we are where we are at this moment, but bring us back to how that journey started and what evolved from that.
Okay. Great question. And it really started, why I'm sitting here with you today is because I took a drink of alcohol, my first sip of alcohol when I was 11 years old. I didn't get drunk, but I fell in love with kind of the rush of that. And I was like, man, and I knew it was wrong, but there was something about it that kind of grabbed me. I grew up in an atmosphere, my family partied, my dad, would drink, my mom smoked, and I just grew up around it and it just was normal. And so, I knew I shouldn't be doing that at 11, but there was something like, I wasn't like trying to hide it either, to be honest. And so, and that kind of just opened the door a couple years later when I smoked pot for the first time. And when that happened, that opened up the whole drug world to me. And I started getting involved in every drug possible that I could get my hands on. I realized at a young age, I had this all or nothing mentality, which can be really good if you're got it channeled in the right directions.
Right.
But with drugs and alcohol, I was all in. I remember even saying it like, I'm going to do this the rest of my life.
Wow.
I loved it that much at age 13. And basketball was my passion growing up. I wanted to get a college scholarship. I wanted to play in the pros. And so I was obsessed with that too. I was all in with that too. And I would practice 2 or 3 hours every day, starting in 6th and 7th grade. And that was my love. But then unfortunately, I fell in love with drugs and alcohol. And, midway through my high school career, if you want to say it that way, I was an addict. I didn't know it at the time, but I was, and I was getting high every day, drinking every day, and that kind of thing. And so that led to eventually me losing my scholarship. And there's a whole amazing story, if you want to get into that changed the course of my life. And that's why ultimately I'm sitting here talking to you today, which blows my mind that had I not taken that drink of alcohol at 11, who knows if I'd even be talking to you today. It's kind of weird to think of it that way, but
it is. And having young kids myself right now, and I know your children are much older than mine, of course, but I actually was having this conversation with somebody just yesterday morning of wondering, is that kind of addictive gene, so to speak, something you're born with or not, right? Do you see those behaviors in somebody that young, and or when I say that young, being 11, and were you able to recognize that in hindsight? Like you said, you were always full in on one thing or another. Now with young kids, you see they're fully into one thing or another, and you wouldn't equate that to, oh, it's kind of obsessive or it's addictive per se, right? But even with my children that are 2, 3, and 5, I can see one tends to be more into collecting things. One isn't really that into it. One's, loves snacks and all that sort of stuff. If he's missing, he's usually in the cupboard getting a snack, so I start to look to see, are these behaviors telling me something, or is it just normal? Right. And I think there's a fine line as a
Yeah,
parent too, of overanalyzing it, right? To protect
totally.
them from these types of behaviors to, no, it's just normal. So
Yeah,
having walked that path yourself, would you say, I don't, and obviously your career. So if you want to actually
yeah,
tell people what you do for a living too now, which makes you even more educated and an expert in this field to answer this question probably. But
yeah.
would you say that that is a thing for noticing those behaviors at a young age, or is it something that no, you wouldn't really know until later?
A great question. Wonderful question. For the listeners, I've been doing what I'm doing for 33 years now. I've been clean and sober for 33 years. I've got a Sud C. I've got a degree in business, but I also ended up like I said, I got my Sud C, and I've been meeting with clients over and over again. I have my own kids as well. And I don't think we're born with an addictive gene, but I do believe that some kids like myself have more of a tendency to go down that. I was a very anxious kid early on. I think I was more a product of my environment, because
Hmm.
when I have 4 children, and one of my daughters is so much like me. She's all or nothing. She's all in when she does something. She struggles with anxiety, and that was me. And
Okay.
luckily, because of my own experiences, I've been able to help her stay clear from drugs and alcohol by teaching her at a young age that that's maybe not the route to go. But again, she copes in other ways, right? And so
Mhm.
I think I don't think could she be an addict? Absolutely. Out of my 4 kids, looking at them, she would be the one. If she got involved in that, she would be more like, oh my gosh, all in. That would be
Hmm.
really scary. Not that they all couldn't get caught up in it, but
Sure.
my experience is I think we're more a product of our environment, but we do have tendencies. Some kids are a little more anxious. Some kids are a little more OCD. Some kids, may have, attention issues and things like that. And so as a parent, you can honestly see them growing up. So there's certain things I think we can do even at a young age that I have done with my own children that was, I think, life saving for them.
Can you share some of those things?
Yeah. I think the number one thing, honestly, and this is going to sound so simple, and people are going to go, oh, yeah. When they turned the age of 12, I took them out on an individual date, just me and my son or my daughters. I have 3 daughters and 1 son. And I shared my story with them. I shared them about my addiction. I shared what happened to me. I shared how I didn't almost make it out. Now, I didn't give them all the gory details, but one of the
Sure.
things I hear a lot with my clients now, like I'll have a younger client will share some heavy stuff with me, and I'll say, have you ever told your parents that? And they're like, no, I could never tell them that because my parents have done nothing wrong. They won't
Mhm.
understand. And I'm like, well, your parents have done things wrong. They just haven't told you. So for
Right.
those listening, I think the key is we don't have to give gory details about our past to our children, but our children need to understand I wasn't a perfect kid. I struggled. I struggled with anxiety and feeling depressed at times. And I unfortunately got caught up in drugs and alcohol. And I shared my story with my children. And to this day, they'll still tell me, Dad, that was one of the most effective things you
Mhm.
had ever done. Because I think sometimes as parents, we're afraid, like, if I tell them I did these things, now they have, oh, I'm going to go do it too. And I know every
Right.
kid's different, but I also, in that conversation, told them what I expected of them as the way they would live their life. I said, I don't want you going down that road. And if you ever feel like you're going down that road, you need to come talk to me. And I promise you, I won't, I won't, shame you, but I will be able to talk to you. And so having that open dialogue at a young age was to me the number one thing that really helped them.
Yeah, and that it makes so much sense, and I feel, at least from our generation, I don't know about you, but those types of conversations were not had by our
For
parents,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
We never talked like
um,
that.
no, the open dialogue now, I think sometimes we overcompensate with our kids, I think, because we do know that we can try to be so much better than our parents, but at the same time, I think we didn't our parents didn't give us enough credit to
Right.
understand it, and like what you're
Yeah.
saying for your kids, they got it, it
Yep.
resonated with them, it landed with
Yeah.
them, and it changed. You could probably say it changed some decisions that they were put in front of in high school or college or
Yeah.
whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
And not having that conversation leaves people, children, whoever, kind of in the wind of not knowing where to go and what to do. I know I
Exactly.
often say for me, I think I was always too afraid to make the wrong decision. And that's a whole nother thing. Like,
Yeah.
why are you so fearful? But in a way, my parents never had to worry about me because I knew like drugs didn't interest me
Yeah.
and
Right.
alcohol, I could drink it or take it or leave it, that sort of
Right.
thing. But, my boyfriend in high school wasn't that way. He was like you. And,
Yeah.
nobody
Yeah.
knew that. But at the same time, we weren't spoken to so bluntly, I guess, about it.
Right.
And
Exactly.
it is such a real issue. And I see it all the time still with, we're dealing with my extended family, my brother-in-law's family with addiction. And
Mhm.
it's a real, literally to your point, it's ripping apart the family,
Yeah.
the situation, everything. And it's so destructive,
For
and trying to
sure.
get ahead of it in any way you can, I think is helpful.
Yeah. I'll add one more thing to that.
Please.
One of the things that and again, I had a mentor in my life. I'm standing on the shoulders of a giant right now. This
Mm,
mentor took me under his wing, but I give him credit for a lot of these things I'm talking about. But at a young age, I taught my kids that if you tell me the truth, I'm going to give you a promise as a parent. I will not get upset when you tell me the truth. Now that's a bold thing to say, right?
yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I also would say that doesn't mean there won't be consequences. That doesn't mean that there doesn't need to be some discipline behind it. So, because what happens is when kids associate telling the truth and getting in trouble, guess what? Who No one wants to get in trouble. And when you're a kid, you're like, I'm going to avoid saying that because I
And
don't
I
want
will
to get
tell you, even the 2-year-olds understand
yes,
that concept.
absolutely. Right. So when my kids would say something to me like, hey, dad, some kid, and this is a true story. My son said, hey, I got offered marijuana today. And he was in junior high at the time. And I literally just gave him a hug and I said, thank you for telling me the truth. And then I
Hmm.
said, so what did you do? And he goes, well, I told him no. And I said, great. Do you need help with anything around that? And he says, no. And I said, again, thank you for telling me the truth. Instead of going, all right, where's that kid's parents? And start freaking out. Okay, I'm taking you out of that class or whatever. No, I didn't do any of that. Now, did I
Yeah.
think that maybe a little bit? Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I was taught that by my mentor. And I tell you, my kids they'll testify. They grew up knowing that they could tell me anything. And then
Hmm.
I would actually just give them, thank you for telling me the truth. But we also had consequences for some things that they maybe have, messed up on. So it was really
So we're working
effective.
on the consequence part, I would say, at our house, but that is
Yeah.
a mantra of ours, that you will not get in trouble for telling the
I
truth.
love it. Love it.
And I think the part is they still try to not tell the
Yeah.
truth until we talk through that conversation and say, you will
Yeah.
not get in trouble if you tell
Yeah.
the truth. And then they do. And so then it's
Yeah.
thank you for saying that.
Love
But
it.
me as a parent, now I need to figure out, oh no, now what are the consequences? Of course, as you get older, it's different and
Sure.
becomes more interesting to navigate, I'm sure. But I think just that small sentence to somebody makes them feel safe, right?
Yeah. Right.
And safety and security is, for me, growing up with an alcoholic father and my mom with some mental illness, that was a big issue. I realized
Yeah.
is I
Right.
wasn't feeling secure and safe. And I think that is part of what kept me very straight and narrow, is I felt kind of responsible of, I need to make sure I'm good because the situation isn't really good over here, right? So
Absolutely.
it manifests and comes up in different ways, but I think that's great advice for any age because, again, that 2 to 7-year-old phase too is when they're really being imprinted the most too about how they
Absolutely.
communicate with them. And I know for me, having my children come to me with anything is, that's my prayer for them, that they always
Yeah.
feel that they can. And at this age, you never know what's going to
Yeah.
end up, right?
Right.
So all
No,
we can do is hope and pray that that will end up being the way. But
I love it. I
so
love that you're doing that. That's great.
tell us a little bit about your podcast. It is so impactful for so many people and so impressive in so many ways. So tell our audience a little bit about that and
Oh,
how
thank
that
you.
came to be its own
Yeah.
thing.
Well, I call it a belief cast because I'm obsessed about beliefs. Upon
Okay.
that little word belief hang all our sorrows and all our joys. And so,
Mm,
there's an old Latin proverb that says, believe that you have it and you have it. And so I've always just been obsessed with beliefs because I used to struggle with my own beliefs. I used to believe I wasn't good enough. I'm different, so I can't connect. My problems are too big, and there's ultimately something wrong with me. And those beliefs held me back and kept me stuck, and it really honestly fueled my addiction. And so
Mhm.
I just decided to call it a belief cast. And about 6 years ago, I've been meeting with clients for 30, like I said, 33 years. And the stories I hear of people, what they've been through, how they overcame it, and now they're doing this and that. And so I thought, I want to start sharing these stories. And so
Yeah.
on a whim, I bought this podcast starter kit on Amazon for 99 bucks. It was this cheap little one mic. And I thought, I'm going to just do one episode, see how it goes. And I had this guy that was a former client of mine, and we had this one mic that we're both trying to talk into. It was really awkward. And I did about 3 or 4 episodes, and I thought, man, I really actually like this. This is really cool. And so I decided to go all in, right? That all or nothing. So I went and bought all the best equipment you could buy. And I, decorated my office with all this great stuff. And I just started meeting with clients. At first I thought I'm going to share just on addiction, but then I realized everyone has a story. Like you have
Mhm.
a story. I mean, and your stories are amazing. And again, like that's why I was so drawn to you, Elizabeth. Just the light you bring into this world is so amazing. And I want to forecast. I want people to see that. I want to broadcast you because of the way you live your life, because guys, we need more of this light into the world. And so that's kind of how it started. And that was like 6 years ago. I just posted my 291st episode. We're ranked in the top 100 in mental health. And I'm booked out with guests till the end of October.
That's
And it's,
awesome.
and it's just, it's caught this momentum, and I'm just like, and you probably do the same thing. I like pinch myself going, I had you on my podcast. Are you kidding me? It's just cool. And that's kind of why I do it. I love sharing stories because it saves lives. Honestly, I've had people say, hey, I listened to so-and-so and I decided I wasn't going to end my life. And I thought, okay, this is why I'm doing this.
Yeah.
You
It
know?
it it really is that. Well, first, let me say too, I just got off a client call before I got on with you, and to
Uh-huh.
talk about belief. She's the words she used was, "I'm a failure. I'm
Yeah.
barren. I'm horrible. I am." All these things that are, I just get goosebumps saying those words because the
Right.
power of these words and the belief that people have
Yeah.
has the power to change your DNA and how you show up in the world, right?
Totally.
And it is a reprogramming of your brain essentially to change that belief. And it's
Yeah.
a lot easier than we think, right? But
Sure.
having somebody to help you through that process is really key, because when
Yeah.
you're in those states, it doesn't seem like it's ever possible to change that. And I think you and I can both say it is possible.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we've seen it
Absolutely.
many times. Yes. And
Yeah.
so also that mental health aspect, that mindset is, in fact, it says it right behind you, mindset is everything.
Oh
It
yeah.
really, everybody can relate to mental wellness in some form or fashion, whether you actually deal with it on a severe level or somebody who does, or just you're having a funky day or you're having a better
Mhm.
day, right? You know that
Yeah.
that affects your mental well-being. So I
Absolutely.
highly, highly recommend you listen to Todd's podcast, Belief Cast,
Yeah.
and
Thank
and
you.
to refer that out to other people, because you never know who needs to be hearing some of the stories that he has on there, because
Yeah.
like I said, everybody can relate to some aspect of that. And
For sure. Yeah.
just that, again, that word is so powerful in and of itself. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
So before we started to record, you were telling me about first of all, a few things, but that you just bought a cold plunge, which I am so fascinated about. I'm going to circle back to that, because
Yeah.
another part of that, which I love that you said, is that your family works out together every Friday,
Yeah.
which I think is such a cool, I don't know if you call it a tradition, a habit, or what, or
Yep.
both. I don't know.
Yeah.
How did that start? And when, how did, tell me about that a little bit, because again, the ages of your kids, you can share that. But I would think at some point they're not really interested in hanging out with the family on Fridays anymore,
I
right?
know. Yeah, it's interesting. So, no, great question. So I have 4 children. I have 2 grandchildren. My oldest daughter is married, and that's where we get our 2 grandchildren from. And then I have my son, who's he's still single. He's 26. And then my daughter, who's 25, just got married in August. And then my
Awesome.
youngest daughter, she's in a relationship, but they'll probably get married. They've been dating for 3 years now, and she's 21. And so that's the date range of my
Okay.
kids. Well, we do like exercising, and exercise is big for me. It's part of, I work out every morning. It's part of, I call it my morning meds,
Okay.
because it's so critical for my mental health. And
Hmm.
so anyway, my family, fortunately, all love working out too. And so my son-in-law put a gym in his basement. He just got this, started buying equipment. And so one day we were just working out on a Friday. It just happened to be on a Friday. And we're like, we should be doing this every Friday, and we should have dinner together and let's watch a movie.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so we started doing that. And we've been doing that, I think we're going on almost a year and a half now, where we work out. We usually get dinner together and then we watch a movie, but then we also incorporated this thing it's called the plunge. And it's where you go and get, you sit in the sauna, and then you go sit in the cold plunge, and then you rest, and you do like 3 rounds of that in an hour. And I couldn't believe how good I felt after that. And so again, me, all or nothing, I thought, I'm buying me a cold plunge. And so I did. I bought a cold plunge, and we were talking off air before we started that I started the cold plunge. I did the cold plunge this morning to kind of after my workout to start the day. And I was just, man, it feels amazing. And the benefits they're coming out with, that they're finding out, is it lowers anxiety. It's good for your central nervous system. If you have migraines, it helps with that. If you have joint pain, I'm not kidding you, it takes away your joint pain. Now,
Well,
it
is it
doesn't mean
because your body's so in shock
you're
that like
numb.
you can't, yeah, you can't think about anything else
Yeah, it's
because you're
probably a little
like,
bit of that.
what is
But I'll tell you,
happening?
the mental challenge at 6 a.m. to get in a
Yeah.
cold plunge at 45 degrees, I'll tell you, it's such a mental thing. But I'll tell you, I just doing that, knowing that I did that this morning. One of the hardest things you could do is get into something cold after, being, in a workout and in your warm bed too, and that kind of thing. And so I've incorporated that in my routine, so to speak. And it really has been a game changer for me.
Is it getting easier, or do you feel like you still have to psych yourself up to do it?
It's getting easier, but I still suck myself. Like if there was a camera on me when I'm standing on the side of it, I'm over there going, okay, I can do this. I can do this. I can do
Yeah.
this. Just get in, just get in. And sometimes I'll sit there for like 2 or 3 minutes trying to psych myself up.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it is getting a little easier.
I literally don't think I could do it. I don't think
You
I
could,
can.
if you did it once, you'd be like, because what's interesting is when you get in, the goal is to control your breath, and that's where I struggle the most. But the first 30 seconds I'm like trying to slow down my breathing, but once you get there after 30 seconds, I don't know how to explain it, but you feel this calm, and all my thoughts, negative thoughts, they're gone. I'm one with that cold plunge. Talk about being present, right? What did Buddha say? Like when you're present, the suffering stops.
Mm.
I really am not suffering, even though I'm in this ice cold bath. And so, yeah, it really truly is an amazing thing that I've been doing.
Are you supposed to stay in it for a certain amount of time?
I
Because if I did do it, I would be in and out, and I'm sure that doesn't count.
maybe not. They say the sweet spot's between 4 and 5 minutes. So
Okay,
I
which
think
is a
anything
long
after
time if
six
you're,
minutes, you're kind of getting a diminish on your return. But yeah, I stayed in the 5 minutes this morning, which was a record for me.
yeah,
So,
good for you. Good for
yeah.
you. Well, more power to you for being able to do that. I think it's
Oh, thank you.
awesome. I
No,
like I
thank
said,
you.
I've seen so many amazing people that have this as part of their routine, and
Yeah.
it's impressive. It really is. So again,
Yeah.
good for you, and good for you
Thank you.
for bringing your family together in that way, for you all to
Yeah.
decide this is what we're doing. I think that that connection at any age too is so important to lay down that foundation for then, like you said, your grandchildren who are now here, and all of that,
Totally.
and bringing back, I mean, there's studies that show the families that are connected and eat dinner
Yes.
together and do all of those things, those children are that much more mentally well than those that
Yeah.
don't eat together, etc. So again, now that my kids are young, we're still trying to figure out what are our routines going to be, what are our
Yeah.
traditions going to be, how can we start to incorporate some of those things. So I love that idea.
Yeah, I always say connection. When you're connected, you're never more fully alive. And
Mm,
having your family connected like that. And in my world, connection's the opposite of addiction. right?
Yeah.
When I'm in my addiction, I isolate. And I may be connecting with but it's usually with the unhealthy people, which is not a good thing. Doesn't mean they're bad. They're just unhealthy like you are if you're in your addiction. But
Hmm.
that connection piece is huge.
Yeah. I've been saying lately since the whole COVID thing that connection is the new currency, at least in my world, and having
Yeah,
that be,
I like that.
really treating that as the currency. And
Yeah,
how present are you when you are connecting with people, because they can feel that, and it is so healing for whoever it is that you're talking to, even if it is over Zoom, right? To just
yeah,
know that I had
for
a
sure.
connection with someone
Yeah,
today
totally.
versus I'm isolating myself or whatever else you're doing. Or I'm just, even if you're not isolating yourself, maybe you're just busy around working or doing whatever, but the currency of a connection is there. There's no end to that. So I agree with you on the same page
Yeah,
there.
cool. Yeah, it's good stuff.
So what do you feel, of course your children is probably your greatest accomplishment and creation, but aside from your children, what would you say in your life to date would be your biggest success as far as creating in your life? Is it your belief cast? Is it books? Is your business? Is it your overcoming
Mhm.
addiction? What can you share with our audience about what's your biggest creation to date?
Wow, that's a great question. There's a lot on that list. Yeah, family's usually at the top of that, but if I couldn't mention my family, I would have to say the greatest accomplishment, the greatest thing I've ever done was to create the belief, which by the way is true, that there was nothing wrong with me.
Hmm.
One of the things, I actually have it on this other side of my wall in my office because my clients sit right here behind me, and I
Okay.
have them read this statement out loud, and it says, the most delightful surprise in life is to suddenly recognize there's nothing wrong with you.
Hmm.
Because my addiction wasn't the problem. It actually, I was fueling and feeding myself with irrational beliefs. I was poisoning myself with that belief that I wasn't good enough. And
Hmm.
so actually overcoming that belief and believing that I'm okay, that truly was, I mean, I look back and that's been the catalyst of everything I do. It's allowed me to write a book. I can't even believe, I mean, I wrote a best-selling book. That blows my mind. And I'm just an average Joe dude. I don't know. I mean, but I am passionate about what I do, and I know you can relate with that because you're so passionate about what you do. And so yeah, that's been the catalyst for everything else in my life, is believing that I'm okay.
Which is so touching, because so many of us feel that we're not okay at some point in our
Yeah,
life. And it just
sure.
depends on how deep that takes us, right? For some people,
Hmm.
it takes you to addiction, to some to divorce, to
Yeah.
whatever,
Oh
food
yeah.
addiction, whatever. So
Well, it's
I
kind of like
can,
that call you just had with that client.
yes.
They ultimately are saying, I'm not okay. Now, here's the thing, and I want to
Yeah.
make this clear for your listeners. It's very popular right now to say it's okay to not be okay, which is true. But I like to add at the end of that, but you're still okay. You just don't know it yet.
Right.
And that's where you come in for people who reach out to you.
Yeah.
That's ultimately what you're eventually get them to realize that, hey, even though you were going through that, you were still okay. And they go, oh yeah, I guess I was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, speaking of the book, let's hear about that before we wrap up, because that is
Okay.
definitely something that we cannot leave without speaking of.
Yeah. So I wrote a book called I Am Recovered. And, in the recovery world, that's almost a four-letter word. You could never say you're recovered.
Mm.
But in my 33 years experience and meeting with thousands of clients and actually going through it myself, I have seen people be recovered. I think that's actually possible. You can overcome any addiction and go live your life. I think a lot of times we identify ourselves with the years of addiction, but who was I before that ever started, from 0 to 13? Before I ever did any of that stuff, who was I? I was honest. I was forgiving. I was kind. I had the will to never give up. Just like your own
Mm.
children, you see that in them. That's
Yeah.
just inherently who they are. And so this book is about my story of overcoming it, losing my scholarship. Um, I share about how I was getting ready to end my life, and then I had a miracle happen that changed the course of my life. And so I get really real and raw in that book. It's not a long book, but it's powerful, and it's, if anyone who's listening to this has a family member or a loved one who's struggling with addiction, I think this would be a good book for them to kind of help them down that path of getting the help that they need to overcome it. But so yeah, it's just kind of in a nutshell what the book is. And it was like a labor of love. It was like, it's kind of like bittersweet. Like it was so difficult, but at the same time, it was great to get it done.
And so helpful to people that are out there. And I think that's sometimes what we forget, right? It's hard for us, but knowing that somebody out there needs to hear that, just like you were saying about your podcast, people have said it saved my life. Somebody out there needed, even if it's just that one person, which now, it's more than that because it's a bestseller, but it's so helpful because so many people are going down that same road and need that one book to just be like, that's the hope that I needed for today to change my trajectory. Right.
Yep,
So,
exactly.
well, it was such a pleasure to speak with you again, Todd.
Yeah.
Thanks again for your time. Thank you for all the work that you do in the world, and we'll chat again soon, I hope.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Creation Innovation Podcast. Make sure to follow us on Spotify for free episodes and subscribe to the Creation Innovation Podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you choose to get your podcast. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast wherever you're listening for a chance to receive a special gift. Yes, we actually do send out gifts. It's my favorite thing to do. So visit us at elizabethking.com/creation innovation for more information on how to enter. Every review counts, and we are so grateful. You can follow me at the official Elizabeth King on Instagram or TikTok. Until next time.